You're listening to Around Comics. 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 Comics.
You are listening to Around Comics, episode 439, Trade Talks, The League, Extraordinary Gentlemen, Volume 1 by Alan Moore and
Kevin O'Neill.
Kevin O'Neill. That's right.
It's the work. It's the workday. It's the workday work.
Yeah,
session.
It is the special workday. Work
yeah,
and
throw us up on the conference room TV. You know.
Yeah, right. Introduce us to your, office.
It's like a Teams call. It's like the best Microsoft Teams call of all
We
time.
should have done it in Zoom or something.
Oh no, this bad vibes.
This is the most awake. This is the most awake and sober I think we've been in years.
This will probably be the best episode we do,
or maybe
worse,
or the worst, or the worst. I don't know. I think being more alert might help us.
Yeah.
It is a weird
tired.
Thing, like, yeah, I haven't been, I haven't had a couple of drinks in me already. It's not, with the wind down. I gotta go back to work after this.
I'm like drinking coffee. I'm like, the days ahead of me.
You guys notice I got a new camera. I switched my basement around completely. I'm on the other side.
You messing with my world, man.
You can see some comic books back there, and my Stan Lee signed Spider-Man print back there. My
very nice
E-Weeks Superman.
You've rearranged the set.
I've rearranged
it up.
I got to
freshen it up.
I got this weird camera that's making me look very blown out. I don't know why.
No, you look beautiful, man. Love it. Own it. It's great.
Here we go.
I don't know if people are watching us on like an 86-inch conference room TV. We all look like shit, but that's just I'm
looking a little puffy. I'm looking a little puffy.
Yeah.
Sorry. What version did you guys read of Lee? Did you
originally?
Originally. I'm sure you read it when it was coming out from America's Best Comics, which this is. Was this the first Alan Moore America's Best title?
No,
was that Tom Strong?
I believe. First,
yeah,
is what I remember. This was actually, I think, a while. Like it was America's Best, but it was after Wildstorm had already
acquired it. That whole story about how Alan Moore spent years trying to get away from DC after the whole like V for Vendetta kerfluffle, and it was pretty public about all of that. And then he goes and starts doing America's Best Comics, and then they get purchased by DC.
Well, that was the thing. Like it was Jim Lee. So Jim Lee owned Wildstorm, and he wanted to partner with America's Best Comics. And Alan Moore said, "Fine, I'll do that as long as you promise me that it'll never be part of DC," because he was very leery of Wildstorm and DC's connection and Jim Lee's connection to DC. And Jim Lee promised him he wouldn't, and then turned around and sold Wildstorm to DC. And Alan's like, "Fuck you, It was just another fucking ass fucking that Alan got out of the comic book industry. It's just, and that
at
was
that point he's like, fuck it, I'm going to Avatar.
Yeah. And now he's just completely done with comics.
No,
good job, Jim Lee. You greedy prick.
Avatar and Top Shelf. They took League to Top Shelf.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I read the original issues back in the day, but for this one, I read the old Absolute edition. As I'm holding it up, pulling a Chris, pulling up the old Chris version. I hadn't read this in a while, actually.
look different than mine.
I took the slipcase off.
Oh,
yeah,
you guys.
Yeah, I can see it over there.
Why would you?
I have it right over there.
Oh.
I just like when I read it and I'm like laying down.
It slides.
I have the slip. Yeah, and like like I got weak hands. So this was my pick, and I'm gonna ask you a question to start this off with, and I mean this as a compliment to Mr. Alan Moore and Mr. Kevin O'Neill. Is this the dumbest Alan Moore comic in the sense of like it is straight up like the goofiest, like in a good way, where it's just like this is like I step on the gas, like this one's not like the.
I think there's a couple ways to look at it. I agree. Yes, it is. We'll get into how layered it is and all of the
I mean dumbest in the best way possible, because I think there can be things that are very dumb that are very good. And
I think the movie is exhibit A on how you can take this concept and make it completely ridiculous in all of the wrong ways.
Dumber.
Make it even dumber. Yes. Yeah, because that's when you read it, you're like, oh, I see how you got to that movie from here. Because this, like, I get it. Like, because there's elements of all the dumbest things in the movie they're not from nowhere. Yeah. You know, like you can see where you could look at this and be like, actually, what if we made it like we juiced it up a little bit, like action movie? You know, like I can see why it come from that. And it's been such a long time since I read it, and you know, as I finished it, I was like, this is, even though it's dense, right? Like there's the whole Jess and Evans annotations of it, of like all the little like breadcrumbs and like little references to things. At its heart, it is pretty much like a straight up like goofy romp that you probably shouldn't take.
It's an adventure book. It's an adventure book.
It's totally like just like it is, it's very it's very tongue-in-cheek, like, which I sometimes I think more maybe there's a double-edged sword to that sometimes, right? Of like you could look at a story like this and you could be like, it's if you're looking at it straight on, right, without much like thought about like this is like a goofy romp through like Victorian literature, you can look at this and be like, hey, it's a little weird that the bad guys are all like pretty stereotypical evil Chinese like villains, right? And like if you just look at it straight on, you could be like, this is perhaps a bit strange, unless you look at it, because there in the annotations there's actually a quote from Moore where he talks about that, where he's like, people perhaps could see it that way, except for the like the intention is that it is like a romp through like how sort of ridiculous Victorian like literature and like the stereotypes of what the villains are and the stereotypes of like sexual purity and like those elements, like which can you for his word.
Can you examine stereotypes without being stereotypical?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, where it's kind of like, I don't know, man, because people have a hard time figuring out Rorschach's bad. You know what I mean? So it's like,
but you can't write stuff because people are dumb. Like, I'm gonna write.
No. That's what I mean. It's like Moore's explanation, where I'm like, I don't know, man. I think that's a lot of asking people to like dissect it to that like fine of a level. I think you're definitely going to get people who are not going to get that element of it in it. Surface. Right on the, which is aside from the book. But I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I read all the annotations too, which I've never done.
Oh, wow.
I read, and I was like, this is like, I don't know, is this like more having the most fun? of anything?
I mean, I think it definitely is one of, but I think when the whole ABC, the America's Best Comics, when doing that is when he was doing more fun comics.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think Moore almost got trapped in, because of Watchmen, he got trapped in this idea of like, oh, he's this serious comic book writer where it's weird and there's all this subtext and there's all this other meaning to his comics. It's like, if you look at most of everything that he wrote outside of that, it's not all like that. Like, it's not.
No,
I mean, like, there's a lot of fun stuff. His Superman stuff, his mainstream superhero stuff, a lot of it is very fun. And
his Green Lantern stories are all.
Has no one ever read Halo Jones?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Right? Yeah. So there's all
DR and Quench. I mean, honestly, he started as a fucking comedy writer.
Yeah, I think, but I think there's definitely a lot of fun with this because he's trying to, like you said, he's poking fun at sort of like the dryness of Victorian era literature and using all those characters and trying to make like a fun adventure story out of it, not something that's really boring and kind of like, but at the same time, I mean, kind of crazy and wacky and like it is way out there.
Yeah,
sure.
It's out there. I mean, it's like, when you think about like they visit like a school for wayward girls who's run by a character who's like a dominatrix.
Right.
Like stuff like that, where it's like he's pulling these weird things and like combining them in like really strange ways to like poke fun at things and to like deflate the idea. Like you could get real deep into like what the history of England and like the nature of colonialism and like what you think Allan Quartermain represents just on the most basic level as a character, right? Like he was written at a time of sort of like, this is what, our mission in life is for us to go out in like civilized places and like, and spread our culture. Right. And like Moore kind of makes fun of that. Like Quartermain kind of doesn't, his biggest thing going for him is he's like, I guess I'll do this. Right. Like he's not like a mastermind. He's not like, he's definitely not as like, I mean, he's not as cunning as Nemo or Mina, like definitely not. Like he's just like along for the ride, and the best thing that can be said for him, and he is a heroic character, is like, I'll grab this wrench and go fight this guy, like the
people don't want to do. I mean,
exactly. It's sort of I'll jump in. Let's do this.
Yeah, one of my favorite sequences in the book is his withdrawal pages where they lock him in a room in the Nautilus and he's just fucking strung out.
Yeah. It's just like, those little moments, those elements of that are in there, and just like.
But I think it does, like, you bring up a good point on that with him. It's like, is that a statement on the idea of like, well, the British Empire got a lot of shit done just because you had a bunch of dudes that were like, okay, I'll do that for the Queen and for country. I mean, isn't that kind of like how wars are won, or how invasions are? It's just like, okay, I'll do that because it's the what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, he's no great mastermind. No, he's no like. If you have any of the characters, Nemo is the one that's maybe the most like cunning or most like clued in, or he's the one who's sort of like, I don't trust this character, we should do this. Or even Mina is also the one who like deduces where the Doctor is building his lighter than airship and all that stuff, and Quartermain's like, he's along for the ride, right? And like there is like an interesting thing there.
Dragged him along. I mean, they dragged him out of an opium den to be a part of it. It's like he had no interest. It wasn't like he was planning any of this. And they literally drag him out of an opium den.
He didn't want to go either. He's like,
he had no interest in any of this. Just like, all right. And then
I'm high all day.
Or also, like the back matter story, the Allan Quartermain and the Sundered Veil, where it is about, centered again, he's like a drug addict who like gets dragged along on an adventure that he was like not that into being part of.
Like, I'm not really feeling this.
I'm not into this right now.
But that it is sort of an interesting take on like the white savior sort of character that he is, but I think that's what Moore is doing with all of these characters. Deconstructing them, analyzing them, then putting them back together in a way that he can tell a fun story with them. And it's in some ways this book, I mean, I love League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's some of my favorite stuff that Alan Moore's ever done. Like that, Tom Strong, I think, is another one that I just absolutely love. Tom Strong, and Top 10 is all the ABC stuff. I probably enjoyed that way more than like V for Vendetta or From Hell or the more But it's that him in that playground, which he does as well as anyone, maybe better than anyone comics has ever done, of like looking at the history of these characters and the the mythology, their place in the world, their place in history, and then like because he has this insane genius knowledge of all these characters and books and timelines and all this stuff, he's able to warp that stuff and twist it and play with it. And as you go through those annotations, it's insane. It is ridiculous the amount of Easter eggs and things that he puts on every single page, and that forces Kevin O'Neill to draw all these fucking things in there. But it's like there's not many guys that that's a Stanley Kubrick level of research on a story. There's not many people that are doing that kind of a thing with it. But at the same time, then like, oh yeah, but let's make it a really entertaining adventure story.
Yeah.
Like there's all this.
What's interesting. Yeah. It's like the amount of detail in it, but also the willingness to be like, I'm just going to make up a character, Campion Bond, because it fits the story. Like, because I need a character to do this. So like, there's both like the adherence, like I'm gonna try. I'm in a fun way. I'm gonna try and piece all these things together, but I'm also just gonna like say fuck it and like just go go wild and just like we'll do this. Like there's and bringing up Kevin O'Neill is important too because like I mean his art in this is just like I have a hard time imagining. It's like one of those books where it's like who else. I have a hard time imagining somebody else doing it. Like that's just how like ingrained that like look is to these characters, and like the way he sort of like his drawing also sort of walks that line of like it's kind of a joke, but it's also kind of serious. And I was
going to ask you that because it's like how much does his artwork really add to the funny, campy tone of the book? You know what I mean? Like the way, it's like his art style is so unique in that he can do drug addiction as well as violence, extreme violence, which you look like Marshal Law, the amount of extreme violence that is, but then also like really funny, and it all has
goofy looking characters, and like
I mean the super fucking fish in the porthole,
just it's so much range, but it is so unique of a style as well.
It is I think absolutely a partnership in this book. I can't imagine O'Neill not being the artist on it. It's just
and these are
because I could see someone whose art style is maybe a little more traditionally serious, and I think the vibe of the book would be all weird because like it does have to like walk that line of sort of like here's an adventure, but like don't take it too seriously because we're also going to have like a fucking Artful Dodger joke that goes on for like 4 pages during like the climatic battle. We're gonna don't worry, we're gonna get to like
have Mr. Hyde ripping people's arms off and
decapitating people.
It's like, we're not gonna be too serious because we're gonna take like in the middle of the climatic battle, we're gonna have like a extended Oliver Twist joke, like going on in the middle. So like, don't get too serious with it.
Do you guys have a favorite League member?
Gentleman? Do I have a favorite gentleman?
Yeah.
Well, Nemo is, and as we saw, he did what, 4 volumes of Nemo.
Well, Nemo's daughter.
And Nemo's daughter, but
which are excellent.
But he's one of the more interesting. I don't know. I would say, for me, like I like Hyde. I like the way that he's portrayed in the book, and it's always exciting when he's gonna, when he becomes Hyde, and he's kind of pathetic when he's Dr. Jekyll, and so I don't know. He's probably one of my favorite, but they're all great. I mean, they all have plenty of screen time and do their own things and have their own parts of the story. It's hard to pick any of them.
Yeah, I think it turns into Nina's story, really even kind of from the beginning, but through the entire series to its completion, it really is, she's the central character. But Hyde's great. I mean,
my favorite character in it is Professor Moriarty, because it's just like so obviously Kevin O'Neill and Alan Moore are just like, what? Let's have a villain who could not possibly be any bigger, and like whatever the equivalent of chew the scenery is in a comic book, where it's like, we're gonna like swing big for like how villainous this villain is, and like the way he talks, like the way, like everything. He's just like the archetype, like sinister, like mastermind, like in everything, from the way he's drawn to how just like his sort of ridiculously like pompous way of talking.
I feel did you guys watch, Chris, I know you did, but the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock show?
Yes.
Was excellent, one of my favorite Sherlock Holmes reimagining. But I feel like that Moriarty in that show almost took some inspiration from this Moriarty in some ways, because he does seem like way more villainous, just way more like sinister, fucking evil, and
I'm gonna give a speech about like how like how evil I am, the nature of evil,
right.
Yeah, that guy's awesome. Yeah, but he came off as very cruel. It's cruel for fun, right?
Yeah.
Which
I don't know if Moriarty was I mean, I guess to some degree, but that show, it seemed like, man, they really pumped up the vileness in that villain. I think when I first read this, Mina was certainly probably my favorite character. She's a pretty terrific character throughout the whole book. But I don't know. All I know is, man, this is a perfect book for these absolute editions, the oversized editions, because there's all the little, I remember, I didn't do it this time around, but reading the annotations, I certainly did go through at one point and read it with the annotation. So every page I would read the annotations for that page and not move on to the next page until I, and just sort of examining all of the little things. Some of the, it's just like an insane amount of things that nobody would. How do you ever catch that stuff? Seems crazy, but the absolute edition makes it a little easier, because the original comic size,
you're like
of like just fucking ripping some guy in half.
Oh, that's what I loved about Hyde.
Yeah, this is a dangerous book if you have an internet connection and the annotations, because it is just like one rabbit hole after another.
Oh yeah,
it just
sure.
it's well, and we haven't even really talked about the overall concept of League. It's that Alan Moore's created this sandbox where everything that has ever existed on the written literary page can be a part of this. So all of the characters are literary characters, and so you get spoilers, you get into like in later volumes like Harry Potter, right? Because it's there, it can be used.
It all exists.
Anything from books.
Yeah.
When you guys read the absolutes, do you ever take a peek at like the book that's just the scripts?
Yes.
The Alan Moore scripts, where I'm always like, damn, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
he's famous for that. The overwriting.
Yeah.
Like,
but also just like the amount of like what's in his head of like how it is always really impressive. Of like, this is like 9 squares. You see a little bit of the shoulder of this character, like in the, like just how clear it is in his mind, like how like the actual story looks is always like, it's always impressive to me. Of like,
if he could draw, he would just do it all himself.
It's like, I see it in my head. This is how this story goes out there. And like, and the back matter too is so awesome. And just like the stuff, like I love, because it is very much like dopey comics shit, like paint by numbers, and it's Dorian Gray, and it's like just like so obviously just inspired by just like lowbrow stupid comics stuff.
And they kept doing that in volumes as they went on. It seemed like that they expanded that stuff more and more.
Yeah.
But that was when I was reading this in single issues, that was one of my favorite things every issue. Like, oh, what are they going to do in the front and the back of every comic? Because there was always a page of like the goofy, advertisements, but Victorian era comic book advertisements, which is just like the most brilliant thing.
I think Moore has a love for lowbrow and leans into it. I mean, he elevates it in a way. It's almost like a chef like leaning into like low country food and elevating it. I think he does that with lowbrow comics, and I think it's kind of a passion of his.
Well, I don't think he looks at it necessarily as lowbrow. I don't think I don't think he.
I would no. I think he looks at it as lowbrow, but I think he doesn't necessarily see that as a bad thing.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you could do both.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to be
lowbrow. I think is but no, I know what you mean. Yeah, he definitely leans into it for sure. And, well, I think a part of it is just the stuff that he loves.
Yeah.
And it's the things that he excited him about comics or stories or books or whatever it may be. And,
there's something just really funny about the idea of like, let's treat Sherlock Holmes like if he was Superman and like the Superman died and now like things are bad.
Right.
Because like
he was holding everything together.
He was holding it all together. And like now the enemies of the crown can, and it's, and it's like seeing like the thread of what makes comic book character like superheroes, like those threads have always existed in culture, like they're those, like, yeah, Jekyll and Hyde is the Hulk kind of.
Oh, right.
And like those threads that exist in comics, they've been around forever. They're tapping into like, it's always been people's imaginations of like, there is somebody who could solve this mystery, with their own mind, like there's nothing is unsolvable to this person, like in a world full of problems that are seemingly
just ask Elon Musk. I'll tell you, he'll solve it.
He'll solve it
for $8 a month.
$8, you get that blue check, baby.
No, I mean, yeah, definitely. When you look at it, it's like the mythology of any character can go back and you can just sort of like find that cipher for it throughout time. Like I think, you know, it's that archetype. That's why, you know, archetypes just exist because like forever, hundreds, thousands of years, we've been telling essentially the same sort of stories and the same about the same characters, and they just sort of evolve and change in different ways. But yeah, that the, you know, I think Stan and Jack creating the Fantastic Four and the Hulk and Captain, you know, it's like those were, you could find those everywhere. Like you could find those, you know, and that's what Moore, I think, does better than anybody else, though, is like I don't know, he has this ability to sort of like break them down and understand them so well that then he can play with them better than, you know, than other people. Like he's able to just have the confidence of like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, I mean, even like something like Lost Girls, you know, which was his erotic fantasy, you know, comic that he did.
It's porn. Just call it porn.
No, it's absolutely, it's porn. But it's also literary porn. It's like he's using literary characters that he, you know, he's understood or read or, you know, sort of like has this connection to a point where he can then write them as their own characters. You know, like he can create new stories with these characters that someone else wrote. And that's an interesting thing that he's done over and over and over again. Like, you know,
From Hell.
Yeah, right. Jack the Ripper. And, you know, it's like Watchmen. I mean, all of his stories are sort of that same thing. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna re-examine. And, you know, people like try and make it into something like, oh, it's deconstruction. It's, you know, modernism, you know, sort of that kind of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's just also him
telling cool stories.
Yeah, with characters that, you know, he already sees through the veil. He already understands like, oh, these aren't new. I can write Superman, but it's like Superman already existed, you know, like Superman's already been around. So I'm just going to go back and write, you know, something else that with the, you know, Sherlock Holmes or
Tom Strong, you know, he takes, you know, Doc Savage and that whole, I still love that concept of this is present day as it was imagined in the 1950s. I mean, what a great concept to write a comic on.
Well, that's also the cool thing he does with the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, is that he creates an alternate version of Britain that is based on if these characters existed in this world, what would the world look like? That's a really cool part, you know, which he's done over and over again as well. It's like Watchmen. You know, what would the world look like if superheroes actually did exist? How would that be different than it is in real life? Well, he does the same thing here. Like, what would Britain look like if Sherlock Holmes existed and Allan Quartermain and Mina and, you know, all this mythology somehow melded together in an actual, what would the world look like? And it's pretty fucking wild. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you had a Nemo, you know, and that technology and you had all these bad guys, you know, sort of running around and doing all these different kinds of things, like how would that affect just the general politics and architecture and geography of the planet? And he seems to have this incredible mind that he can figure that shit out, which is I think is just it's a huge part of his writing. But it's also like this weird thing where it's not writing, you know, like it's like rebuilding a world. You know, it's not world building, it's like rebuilding of the world. I mean, nowadays you have a lot of like fiction that's out there that's like alternate history and, you know, that kind of thing. It's like, well, Moore was doing that, you know, decades ago and nobody called it alternate history or, you know, it's like, but yeah, so it's League is one of my favorite Alan Moore books for sure, and just the whole franchise of comics is you know, pretty awesome.
Well, it pegs down what Moore is really good at, and that is, you know, and this is kind of the trap that you know, why we look at like Morrison, you know, differently sometimes. It's like I think Morrison has great ideas. Sometimes he pulls them off, and it's fantastic. Sometimes you're just kind of left scratching your head. The League is a perfect example, along with Watchmen, of you can read this and really enjoy it on that surface level of just action movie kind of action story, but then there's the rabbit holes that you can go down, and that's just, you know, Moore has that very literary style to him that he can, you know, first and foremost write an entertaining, engaging story.
Yeah, he never loses sight of it.
Right.
I mean, well, I don't know if the never. I mean, I think From Hell he lost sight of. Not a really,
it's a little indulgent, yeah.
Yeah.
You can fall down a rabbit hole sometimes and the whole book's just a rabbit hole. And you're kind of like, what's happening in this? Yeah. I mean, I always look at like, it's funny because whenever I read this book and I read the text story, you know, and the Allan Quartermain and the Sundered Veil, you know, and you read it and it's like Alan Moore's obviously like trying to write in that like flowery, like Victorian like style, and it always takes me like 3 paragraphs to like get into it, because I'm always like, what the it's like, oh my god, dude, just like, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, like this is how people wrote stuff back then, you know. It is like this is an incredibly like obtuse style of like wandering like sentences, and like, you know, it's just always fun to get back into it and be like, oh yeah, that's right, I get this. Like,
there's definitely a rhythm to it. Like you have to get into the rhythm of the story, and I think the art does that as well. Like I think that Kevin O'Neill's art is a rhythm to it that you have to get into, and if you're not into it, you may not dig that art, you know, like, but once you get into it, I think Kevin O'Neill's always been one of my favorite. Like I still remember like when I first came across Marshal Law, that was the comic that like, nobody seemed to know about that comic book. And that was one of my favorite comic books that I've ever seen in my life. I was just like, what the fuck is it? This is so insanely different than anything I had ever read. And I'm like, why isn't this guy doing more? I didn't really know more about his work and didn't really see a whole lot of his stuff. And I just remember for years and years, it wasn't really until like the internet and like Twitter and stuff that I realized that other people actually even knew Marshal Law existed. And I'm just like, why has nobody ever talked about this fucking comic? I love this comic book so much. But yeah, he hasn't done enough work in my opinion.
What was the League story that was basically a musical? Was that one of the Century?
Yeah, I think so.
Issues, and I was just like, son of a bitch, he can even make a comic book musical entertaining.
You son of a bitch.
You son of a bitch.
I'm trying to find, I forget where it is in the Absolute Edition, but that like artistic rendering of it might be in the slipcover of the drawing of Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill, which is pretty funny.
Oh, right.
Where Kevin O'Neill's like hunched over, like a.
He's physically like he's been chained to a drawing.
Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it's a pretty funny joke. But I've always enjoyed that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's always great to read it, and it's always like fun to dive back into it. And now that there's all these annotations too, of like you can just fall into an entire thing of like, who's this character, and this just like fall into a Wikipedia hole of reading about like, you know,
Andy Cap,
Allan Quartermain, you know, like, okay, who is this character? Like, I get it.
Now I will admit, in doing so, I like went down the pathway of like, well, I'm gonna now read some Allan Quartermain stories.
Oh yeah,
and it's just like, no. This is not what I want.
There's a reason Moore is making fun of it kind of a little bit, you know. It's like all right, Explorer, what happens when you like, you know, what happens when the Explorer kind of finds something like that they shouldn't have found.
Right.
And it's like, like actually your like dumb willingness to like do whatever cost you too, like it's not just all riches are to be found by your, like all steam, all go, hit the engines, let's go.
Well, and it's also just shit written in the 1800s is not.
Oh yeah.
Like,
no, it's very
to try and get through. Like,
no, they are not. Some things do not age particularly.
I don't need to read Bram Stoker's Dracula again. I don't.
Oh, I don't know. It's pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's like a
Bram Stoker. Yeah, I don't know.
It's such a goofy ass book, like told through letters and like me finding Dracula at the train station. Just like dumb, like the way the movie version of Dracula, has kind of loomed so large, and then when you read the book and you're like, this is extremely strange. This is extremely strange. God, what was I reading the other day where someone was talking about having read Dracula for the first time, and they're like, how did this dude not get suspicious about going to this castle when he like shows up in this village and everyone's like, oh, you're going there? And then a dude shows up to drive you in a carriage and he has glowing red eyes. And then like, it's like, I guess I've just got to close this real estate deal. So
he was young, and
he was young.
It's a very white person thing to do.
Yeah.
Well,
it's just funny.
As someone once said about horror movies, I don't remember who it was, but it's like if the characters in horror movies did everything sensible, there would be no horror movies.
Yeah, it would not make any. Yeah, it's like actually, I'm just going to go back to England. I'm not going to go visit this creepy castle. I'm not going to stay overnight. That's for certain. Yeah,
I think our trust in other people was maybe a little greater back then.
This guy keeps getting younger and healthier, and I keep getting weaker every day. This seems normal.
It was too late by then. It was too late.
Yeah.
The Bram Stoker Dracula movie with
Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder
is a pretty good.
Keanu
Reeves and what's the guy who plays Renfield, the singer?
Oh,
Tom Waits. Tom Waits? Is it Tom Waits?
I forget.
Isn't it Tom Waits?
No. Internet, tell us.
I think it was Tom Waits. Yeah, Tom Waits.
Okay.
Plays Renfield, which I think is his best role. I mean, he's been in a bunch of movies, but he did it. I thought he did an excellent Renfield, which I think they're doing a Renfield movie or show coming out soon.
Really?
Yeah, I believe.
Digging deep.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's some, I mean, like some of this, like H.G. Wells stuff, The Invisible Man's pretty good book. Obviously they're classics and stuff, but it's just like, I don't know. Some of it's kind of hard. Did you guys ever watch Penny Dreadful on Showtime?
I've seen a little bit of it, yeah.
Not all of it, yeah.
I mean, that's obviously, it's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I mean, it's the same
same concept.
Thing. Yeah, same concept. But I like that show. I actually liked that.
Yeah.
The first season or two, but after that, I got a little crazy.
And then we can do a whole episode talking about the movie version, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Woo! Yeah, written by
Sean Connery's last role.
Really?
Yeah, he retired after that movie. He was never in anything ever again. James Robinson. We had James Robinson on the show a million years ago, and I think he got just drunk enough with us to be honest about
back when he still drank.
Sober. And I mean, it was a job. He got hired to do a job. He got hired to write the screenplay for this, and it was X2 had just become a huge, one of the first big comic book like mega hits. And after that, I think the directive was put them all in black leather and X2 up the shit.
Well, when they started advertising it, the trailers as LXG,
Yeah,
I knew.
Like, oh no, what happened?
Something horrible has happened, Sal.
No,
Yeah,
what?
I was really looking forward to that movie. Like, oh, a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie. This is going to be awesome. And
it's like, oh no.
I mean, there's parts of it that I still think the guy who plays Hyde, and I thought the look of Hyde was pretty awesome.
There's moments in the movie where I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's some cool parts to it, but overall they just sort of like pissed on the story and just
in League, Nina is a central character. I wouldn't go as far as to call her a woman of action. She's
well, as much as you would be in that time,
right?
Yeah.
And then the movie, she's doing cartwheels and backflips and
right,
and is basically a super.
They comic book the movie
way more than the comic book.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is like it was Hollywood's idea of it's a comic book movie, so
it should all be like ninjas.
Yeah, they're superheroes. This is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah, it was
it's not good.
Not good.
It killed Sean Connery.
It killed Sean Connery's career.
His career.
It's like, I'm done. What the fuck is this?
I'm looking at the cast now, and there's like no one else in it that I don't know anything else that they ever did.
The cast.
Peter Wilson.
Dude, ruined many careers.
Mina Harker. Never saw her again. Tony Curran. Never saw him again. Stuart Townsend played Dorian Gray. Don't know if I ever saw him again. Shane West is Tom Sawyer. I think he's done a couple of things. Jason Fleming, probably the only one that's ever done anything.
Yeah.
But I thought he was great, actually, as
he was
for Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I thought he was probably the best part of the movie. But yeah, unfortunately, not a great movie. It's and just more reason for Alan Moore to hate.
Yeah.
It's like
Nick Lindsay says Stuart Townsend became Charlize Theron's ex-husband.
Oh, there you go. The movie was so bad she divorced him.
Hey, you know what? That's okay. He's still a winner in my book.
On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 17%. Who are those idiots? Ooh. Based on reviews from 185 critics with an average rating of 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
The site's critical consensus reads, just ordinary. LXG is a great premise ruined by poor execution. I would say that's proper. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just kind of continues to show that, Alan Moore writes for the drawn page, and his stuff maybe just isn't great to adapt to film.
Well, I think there's certainly filmmakers that could do it.
Yeah.
We just haven't really seen it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
What is the most successful as far as like artistically, not commercially, but what would you say the most successful Moore adapted movie or TV is?
Let's see. I would say
I think
V for Vendetta.
V for Vendetta.
It's probably the best of them.
Yeah.
It even has its moments.
Yeah, I would just say, I guess V for Vendetta as far as like being coherent.
Yeah. Not being
as like
terrible.
A film, like just like a point of view that you could see like somebody, the filmmakers read the book and like got it. Maybe not totally agreed with every point of it, but like understood like, okay, this is what this story is about. Which seems like such a low bar, but to be honest, with a lot of like the Moore stuff, it is like, oh, this person made this. I don't think got what the source material was.
Yeah,
right.
Fascism
just ignored it, or like or ignored it, or like, or it didn't quite like I know we've talked about this before, but like Watchmen, where like Zack Snyder like created a thing that looked like it,
yes,
right,
but was like but not quite it. Like you can kind of didn't quite get like what Rorschach meant when he's like, "You're locked in here with me," right? Like those are the words you said, but like the meaning of it is different in your movie than it is in the book. Right? It's just like a real subtle thing where it's like, that's like, I mean, that is the bar. It's like, did the does it feel like of this actual like source material, as opposed to like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where it's sort of like, I can kind of see it, but I don't think you actually got, or you just ignored it and decided that wasn't like what's
kind of
cool
like from Hell. What they would,
I mean, I don't know how you make a movie of From Hell that feels like the source material.
You don't.
It's like,
I don't know that you want to. Like, why would you even?
It's like, no. Yeah. That one I almost just toss out as like, I don't know what you do. Like someone had to make this. I guess they optioned it. So like,
yeah, and it's nothing like it.
Well, I think it's like people are just optioning things, and then it's like, well, let's adapt it. But it's it's one thing to like adapt a novel, maybe. Like I think people understand. Even if you're not an avid reader, you could read a novel and sort of like grasp what you're getting, and then turn that, adapt that into a movie. Okay, we got to, it's obviously not going to be the novel, but we got the basic gist of it.
Yeah,
what
get it.
Yeah, like that's what it feels like they've done with Alan Moore's comics, is the same thing of like, oh, well, this is the plot, so I'm just going to tell the plot of the story. And it's like, well, but that's not really how he writes. Like the plot is just there to service the scenes, the story that he wants to tell. And that's, it's like, what, like you said, Watchmen, he got the plot, he got all the characters right. It looked
good,
like the comic book, like to a fault. But then when he added like his own style and his choices to it, it was like, oh, you're a big dummy. Like you don't have any fucking idea what this is about. Like you like really know, concept. And we've seen that from him over and over again with superhero comics or with comic books that he's tried to adapt. Like you don't get this at all. It's like I don't know what the fuck. You're like a frat boy that doesn't read and thinks he knows what Superman is about.
I get what Watchmen is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as we are all on our work lunch break today, happy Thursday, by the way. We'll go ahead and wrap this up. We love this book. We love all of the League. But do you actually? That's a good question. Do you enjoy all of the League stuff, all the way to what, Tempest? Was that the last one?
To various degrees. There's things I like more than others. I mean, I think they've always been they were always a worthy thing of reading. Like some I liked better than others, but like I always felt like I got my money's worth. Like this is a thing of like merit, I think it gets a little complicated as you go along, would be my, like, you might be a little too deep and some twists and turns.
I love the first 2 volumes. I love the entire series, the whole run. But some of the later stuff it's borders on impenetrable on some of it. So
I have to reread a bunch of them. I'm just going to keep reading it because it's been, I read them in such far away chunks from each other, I think, too, sometimes, that like I didn't totally get wrapped into all of them. But like I think as it goes along, it does get I remember liking Tempest quite a bit. Like overall, as far as like, I'm like, this is cool. I'm into this.
Whenever you get to Black Dossier, just be ready to read a lot.
Black Dossier is one where I'm like, this is dense.
It's really dense.
You put a lot of work into it. I don't know if I love all this.
Don't read that one late at night. You're not going to make it.
I loved Black Dossier, but it did take me a couple of reads to love it. I think.
Yeah,
it's really.
I mean, it goes around so much, like stylistically, and it's just like it's probably the one that I'm gonna like where he really dives into like we're gonna like embrace different like feels of old storytelling, like we're gonna make this part sound like this, you know, and like really go for it. And sometimes that can be a little bit, like you're saying, can be a little harder than other times because you're asking a reader to kind of jump around a lot of like, actually we're gonna do this and now we're gonna do this, and then it's like sometimes it's just hard to like wrap your head around. You like it's almost like you need to take a breather, right? Where we're so used to a book where it's like I'm gonna read this whole damn thing in one go, and like that's definitely a book where that's like it's a challenge to do it all in one shot because I just think your brain is jumping around so much to like these different things.
Yep, little overload. Well, thanks for bringing this one up, Tom. It's one of my favorites. Thank you out there for listening and or watching. Check out our Patreon stuff at patreon.com/roundcomics. And Sal, I think it's your pick.
Oh, what the hell was that?
That wasn't me.
I don't have one to pick. I did not pick.
That's
one.
all right.
I'm not prepared, so
right.
I will have to.
We'll find out.
I will have to figure one out.
Okay.
I don't want to pick one just off the top of my head. So
no, that's fine. But you have the next pick.
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Volume 2.
No,
keep on. We'll go through Black Dossier. We'll just read League of Extraordinary Gentlemen from beginning to end
for the next 8 months.
Nice.
The next 8 months.
Yeah, I'll have to think about
it. Yeah. Don't make a rash decision.
Which you can find out that and more next Thursday on our next action packed. I think we'll be back regular
nighttime
time, regular back
sleepy.
Yep, Thursday
drunk.
8:30 Central Standard Time.
High.
Thursday nights. High, drunk, happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the meantime,
in between time,
we're gonna be everywhere in
and around.
And Mr. Hyde. That